Back Home Media.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In the Free Zone. We've got James Jenkins with us here tonight, and Derek, as always. Gentlemen, how are we doing this evening?
Very good, very good.
That's good. James, for those of you that know James, you know a lot of this, but those of you that don't know James Jenkins was one of the most versatile athletes to ever go through Elkhart High School, one of the most versatile athletes that I ever coached, and I've coached some great athletes. I'm not going to say that James is the best athlete I've ever coached, but he is very possibly the most versatile athlete I ever coached. Like this came up last week when we were talking to Coach Ashworth. James at one time qualified for state in 3 different spring sports in the same year. Golf, track, and played in the state baseball tournament all in the same year. And that in itself is a pretty major accomplishment. In addition to that, James was also a basketball player and a football player, so a true 5-sport athlete.
I have a question concerning all that, just starting things off.
Yeah.
James, I love your dad, but he's like a little guy. Like, where does this come from? Your dad is a great friend of mine. I see your dad pretty much every holiday. He doesn't look like he's was ever tearing up the charts in sports. Like, where does this love for sports and where does this athleticism come from?
I truly think it probably, for the most part, it really came from him. He was a high school wrestler.
Okay.
And in the state of Oklahoma, Guthrie, Oklahoma. And so, he went to state a few years in his high school years for wrestling. So I think, he played baseball too growing up, but his predominant sport was wrestling. So.
Yeah, I can see that with your dad's build. I mean, he's built like a wrestler in a lot of ways. Yeah.
So sports were pretty much paramount early on. Like he made sure you were playing all the sports that were available to you at your age, or. Yeah,
I mean, he wanted to try and give something back to me that he got early on in life, and so for me, I kind of took off with it. I started doing t-ball, when I was 5-6 years old, and just it went from there. So yeah, he got me out there, as like a typical father figure, take your kid out there and just start throwing the ball around. And so I think just for me personally growing up and just remembering back in those early days, I feel blessed. It just kind of, took off on me and just, and I enjoyed it, growing up in Elkhart, playing all the sports, Little League, t-ball. Even the halftime Saturday basketball things that we had up at the high school, and getting out on half court during the boys varsity game, girls varsity games, and shooting the hoops, and then summer league baseball. So, yeah.
So Chris Aranda, I guess the secret I didn't get, he says your dad's super fast. I've only known your dad the last 10 years, and me and him pretty much just hang out and do nothing when we hang out. So I guess maybe your dad's fast, but yeah, that's awesome. So Norm, you got any questions, man?
Well, I was just going to say, if his dad's fast, that's impressive because he has short legs.
Yeah, he's got some speed. I watched him growing up playing men's softball. And, there was times whenever, he'd bat left-handed and I could see him just, poke it out in left field because the switch would be on for right field and he could easily get, double triples.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I can see that. And
so what you're saying is we should have had Denny on the show. He's
yeah.
And, James, of course, was a speed athlete. James had what I like to call, and James, I don't mean this as an insult when I say it, okay? James had what we call mediocre speed, okay? Now, like I said, that sounds like an insult. What I mean is James was fast, but in track, you ran what, about an 11.5, 11.4, 11.5? Is that about right?
I think my fastest 100 was like 11.2, 11.1. So around.
Okay, so that's a little better than I was giving you credit for. But he was not a kid that ran in the 10s, okay? Yeah. But he was faster. I mean, on a football field and on a basketball court, he was faster than a lot of those guys that would beat him in track. Okay. Yeah. So he had kind of mediocre speed on the track, actually good speed, but he had much more. He had sport speed. You know what I'm saying? He had great speed on the football field, great speed on the basketball court. Like I said, a lot faster sometimes in those places than those guys that were faster than him straight down the track. So his speed was good speed, but it wasn't just unidirectional speed. He had, he could move had good lateral acceleration and things like that. And that's what made you a great running back, Yeah. But also an outstanding athlete in track. I don't mean to give the wrong impression because, like I said, he ran well. He's
no Denny Jenkins, but he's
well, here's what I mean. James was a real fast kid and a great kid in the 100 at the 2 or 3A level, right? He wouldn't have been running with the kids at the 5 and 6A level. Those kids are running in the 10s. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But at the same time, James also had this versatility, and that is James could long jump close to 21 foot. Is that right?
Yeah.
And James did a lot of events well. Now, we only got to use him a little bit in track because he was doing other things in the spring most of the time. And so basically the 100, 200, the long jump, we never triple jumped you, did we?
No, but we did the 4x4.
Yeah, 4x4. I knew that.
God.
You could have been a really good 400 runner, but we never had the time to train you to be a 400 runner, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That might have been your best event if we'd have had the time to train you for it. Now, I know you wouldn't have liked that. Don't get me wrong.
Matt Kenny said this from chasing his bad throws in baseball.
Yeah, that's it.
James, let me ask you this, because I'm somebody who Norm doesn't have any stories about me being good at sports, but was it lost on you? Did you know that you were kind of a little better than most of the other people you were competing with? Where were you at mentally? Do you think that swole your head a little bit, or did you think it helped you keep, modest? Where were you at, in your head as far as what you were doing?
I think for overall in general, I never once, thought the fact that I was bigger or better than anybody else, because I know that in my time in the middle school years, maybe even a little bit before that, and especially in the high school years, we had a lot of awesome athletes. And I can remember the year of '93, talking about the big football stuff, those games back then. I was really looking up to guys like Waylon Forbes, Brody Taylor, Edgar Mion, all those guys. So, quite honestly, to just, to reemphasize, to answer your question, I felt like it was the opportunity to learn and grow and to watch the guys that were a little bit older than I was. And then with the guys that I played with in high school, for the most part, just compete well, have a great time, make, lifelong lessons and everything like that. And just, have great memories like this, and sharing those memories, because that's what it's all about.
All right. So, James, just kind of to catch people up, why don't you tell us what you've been up to since high school?
Okay,
I know that covers a lot of territory, so you might start off with where you are and what you're doing now.
I can go back to 2099. I'll start there.
Okay. All right.
So I went to Pratt Community College my freshman year in college, tried to do walk-on in baseball. And at that point, that was kind of a pivotal moment for me, was the fact that getting to college and doing specifically baseball, those guys lived, breathed, and ate that sport. It was nothing compared to what I was, anticipating. So, those guys did, I survived the year, but then after that, I transferred, went to another JUCO college in Chinook, Kansas, Neosho County Community College. I got a golf scholarship there. I played 1 year for that school, and then transferred to another school in Texas now, because I was kind of like, being back in eastern Kansas is kind of a far, back 6-7 hours away from home. So I was kind of wanting to be a little closer. So I went to Plainview, Texas, and went to Wayland Baptist University. I drove down there for a visit and to play with the golf team at that time, and because I got an invitation from the golf coach. And he seemed to like the game, so he said, you're more than welcome to come onto the team. So, God said, hey, let's go to Wayland. So I went to Wayland, tried out the team, got on there, and found out when I got there in August that the coach took another position somewhere else. So I got there my beginning of my junior year, and we didn't have a coach. So our athletic director at the time was lucky enough to find a gentleman, Coach Tom Harp. He's still in Plainview, Texas, so a shout out, Coach Harp. He's a firefighter for Plainview. So he had a full-time job, and then he decided, he was going to be dedicated and stuck it out with us and became our golf coach at Wayland. So graduated 2003, got married to my beautiful wife, Joy, in 2003 of August. And so she got a teaching job up in Amarillo. And so, at that time, I didn't really have much options or anything like that. I got a business degree from Wayland, so wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. So, golf was my background, and so I applied for the city of Amarillo, got me a golfing job working at the city courses as a greenskeeper. And so I did that for about a year, and then kind of just tinkered off of it and did some other business things in Amarillo. And then just one day, my wife and I got talking, and she was kind of like, what do you think about becoming a teacher? My first thought was, yes, Christmas break, spring break, Thanksgiving, summer's off. Sign me up. Let's go. So anyway, I did. I went back to school in Canyon at WT. I got my post-bac degree for teaching, and then started out going to River Road Middle School, did a coaching gig for a couple of years at the junior high level. And then after that, I went to Elkhart High School in Amarillo. Taught there for about, I think it was 11 or 12 years or something like that. And then just out of, life at the time was kind of, she was teaching and she was coaching, and then she became a counselor. And so she's kind of filled most of the shoes in education. And then about 3 years ago, we were just like, you know what, let's do something different. So, we decided to pick up, come down here to Waco and start a new life down here. So she's now a assistant principal at one of the middle schools in Waco, and I am out here at Robinson ISD in Robinson, Texas, teaching audio, video production, digital media, graphics, animation, Photoshop, InDesign. It's basically all CTE, career and technology. Right. So I do have a class actually that introduced the kids to just some of the basic Adobe software stuff and allow them to get a certification.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So that's crash course for the last 2 years.
Did you take any of the classes when Norm was doing the audio video stuff over in Elkhart?
I just took yearbook.
Yeah.
But that's kind of covers a lot of that, doesn't it?
It does some of it, yeah.
It does cover a little bit. And ironically, my first year here at Robinson, they made me be the yearbook teacher. I knew the teacher that was next to me when I was at Caprock in Amarillo, she was my next door neighbor, and she was a yearbook teacher. So through all those years, I was kind of just feeding off of like what she did. So,
yeah. Well, James, you look like you've stayed in shape. Okay. So tell us what you've been up to. I mean, obviously I'm guessing you're still doing stuff that is athletic or physical in nature. Tell us what you're up to that way now.
I am. I got really interested in obstacle course running about 8 years ago. And, I'll tell you what, so there was a pivotal, I'll tell you the story. There was a pivotal moment. I've been officiating basketball for the last 16 years as well.
Right.
So I can tell some stuff about that here after a while. But there was a night I went to one of the schools, I think it was Canadian, Texas. And I sat on a scale that night, and I was like, holy cow, I'm this weight, and I was like, I'm done, So at that, it's kind of a pivotal moment for me. And so I took it, to myself and said, I'm going to start getting back into shape. I'm going to start working out more. I'm going to start watching what I eat. And I started doing that. And I got onto a program called Advocare. I'm pretty sure most of the people have heard about it. But, I did Advocare for a couple of years, and then I just kind of weaned off of it and started just kind of doing more of my own thing. And so I really got into obstacle course running and racing and working out still. And so, for the most part here in Waco, living here for the 3 years now, I'm a member of a local gym, and they've invited me to be a coach on their staff. So, there's a class that I teach pretty prominently every Saturday, sometimes every other Saturday. But, for the most part, I just watch what I eat, stay physical, do a lot of workouts, and yeah, I enjoy it.
All right.
I definitely don't feel like I'm 40. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Well, plug your gym. What's the gym?
It's Muscle Cave here in Waco,
Muscle
Texas.
Cave.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Yep.
So you just it's kind of hard for me to imagine you like getting obese at all, because you're always athletic stuff. So like, what was that like? Was it just having kids? Life settled you down? You were working a full-time job. You just kind of got comfortable, or?
Yeah. There was a time it was just like especially around when my oldest daughter was born. She's 13 now, so yeah, it was just kind of like didn't want to work out, didn't feel like anything. Yeah, just like what you're saying, got comfortable, and and I think kind of some of it would go back to the 2 years I was coaching, because it was hard. You work long hours, and you're basically trying to eat anything that you can eat, and usually it's not very healthy for you. So
yeah. I can tell you from experience, when you've been an athlete and suddenly you stop being an athlete, it's easy to pick up the weight too. I can remember trying to gain weight when I was playing football in college, and all I had to do was quit playing. I picked up 50, 60 pounds in a hurry.
But I mean, like, me and Norm are both bigger guys. We all have that. I mean, I'm sure every time Norm sees his scale, we're just like, oh yeah, we should totally do something about this. But then we don't. Like,
I can see the scale when I stand on it.
I mean, was it difficult at all to get back on that train, or did you fight with it at all?
It was difficult, and kind of like whenever I was starting my just the time that when I was starting to do all this, I did a little bit of CrossFit, and then one day, just some guy I was working with, a friend in Amarillo, he told me one day, he goes, how far can you run? And my first thought was, I hate running, because I grew up as a sprinter in high school. I do short distance, and so it was kind of like it was just weird, because at that point I was just like, why don't you just go run? So I went and ran and developed that mentality of, this isn't bad. So I kept running and running and running, and I think there was a point, I think probably 5 or 6 years ago, like I was down to like 160 pounds. Like my cheeks and my face were kind of caving in, and people were like, man, you need to put some weight back on. And I'm like, I really didn't notice it at the time, but, looking back through some Facebook pictures or, that kind of stuff. And I was like, holy cow, those people were right. So that's when I kind of just turned the weight training back on, probably about, 5 years ago.
So let me ask you this. I know that doing this type of stuff, it's not cheap when it comes to time. How much do you say you spend like of your week on your like on this portion of your life, working on these like obstacle courses and stuff?
Well, due to COVID last year, I didn't get to run any races, which kind of sucked. But there was a couple years ago, I would do right around probably 6 a year.
Okay.
And there was I think 1 year I did 7 or 8 in one season. But before that, it was kind of like, because it was such a long distance to drive to those venues, locations, and stuff like that. And so I would maybe get 2 or 3 in a year. So, yeah.
All right. Well, James, I'm going to kind of drag you back to your high school days for a while. Okay. When I talk about you as a versatile athlete, and this also came up last week, one of the games that I think about is when we played Southwestern Heights your senior year. We did not have a lot of depth, especially defensively. We had good kids, but we didn't have much depth. And that night, you played every position group on defense. You played on the defensive line. You played linebacker. You played in the secondary. That, to me, was, as a defensive coordinator, was one of the more impressive performances that I can remember. So tell me, given your choice of defensive positions, which one would you really like to play?
I honestly, I enjoyed them all. But if you're going to put me on the spot and, pick maybe 1 or 2, I would probably have to say defensive end.
Defensive end, really? Now, see, I figured it would be linebacker. I really did. That surprises me, defensive end. And you did a good job at defensive end. Yeah,
I think probably for the reason why is because I knew there was some responsibilities about staying home and watching backside and stuff
Absolutely.
like that. For defensive end, I was just like, you know what? I know I'm quick. I know I'm fast. I'm going to beat this guy, and I'm just going to go get the quarterback.
Yeah.
And I think I remember there was a game. I think we played Cimarron my senior year in Elkhart, and I don't know if I got a 15-yard late hit penalty on the kid. I think his name was Kyle Cooper or something like that. I can't remember his name, but but I do remember in that game, Coach. I think I took like 2 turnovers in that game.
Yeah. Hey, I tell you what I'll always remember about that game is, first of all, Heights had a very good team that year. As a matter of fact, they were, if I remember right, I think they were ranked in the top 5 in the state. And we beat them that night, and we not only beat them, if I remember right, we shut them out.
We shut them out 17-0.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And they had 7 times they had a first and goal inside the 10. And we stopped them 7 times when they had a first and goal inside the 10. I mean, that's probably the only defensive I've ever coached that had 7 goal line stands in one game. Yeah. We played phenomenal defense, at least in the red zone that night, for sure.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we put Cimarron in the playoffs, if I remember right, by beating Heights that night.
Yeah.
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 So were you a freshman like what, 95, 96?
I think it was 95.
95. So you're coming off of this. You're a 7th grader whenever Elkhart is crushing it, with the whole Smith Center game. What was it like coming into a team that had just had so much, had so much, staying power just a couple years ago? What was there any kind of nerves going into something that was pretty much established as being pretty good, or?
There was definitely nerves coming into high school for sure, because I knew all some of those guys, watching them play and seeing how huge they were at the time. I mean, I can remember the first practice in that morning where I was sitting in the old gym. Coach Murray was, picking out where we were to go for defense. So, yeah. I would say there was a lot of nerves coming into it for the most part. So I think I also remember my first football game, I think at the JV level, started at Heights.
Yeah.
And I think, and I remember this play because Tom Horton and I were the kickoff returners. And I ran the opening kickoff back for a touchdown.
wait a second. We were using Tom Horton for a kickoff returner?
Yeah, we were. For JV, we were.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, so it's.
I wouldn't have thought of Tom as back there. Now I understand, but I wouldn't have thought of Tom back there. That's funny.
Yeah. So started the career at Southwestern Heights and then ended it on Heights.
Yep. So James, think back to high school. What were some of the big games from high school that you still remember?
God, Coach, I was actually just thinking of this on the way to my classroom. If we start with football, I could say I can remember kicking like field goal. I can remember who it was. I kicked it in the north end zone. It was one of the longest field goals I ever kicked. I don't know if it's like 47, 49 yards. The touchdown that we talked last week, against Johnson back in 98 with under 30 seconds. It was that veer right play. And I can remember somebody in the pile saying, "Oh, heck yeah, we got this game," or something like that. It may have been like Bobby Grice.
I remember Bobby Grice celebrating because it took the officials a long time to signal touchdown. And when they finally signaled it, Bobby's, showing off all of his vertical there.
Yes. Yeah. And I think if I recall, it did I have to come out on that extra point?
You may have.
I thought I did.
I think that's right.
Was it Sean that kicked it, the extra point?
It may have been. I don't remember for sure who kicked it.
I can't remember.
But I think that's right. I think you did have to come out.
I did. So,
but one thing we always had was guys that could kick extra points.
Yeah.
Maybe not field goals, but extra points. We usually had several guys that could do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Football. What else? I guess my junior year, my junior year up in Syracuse. 7 rushes for like 232 yards.
Yeah.
I remember that night. I distinctly remembered that night. I had some long touchdowns.
Long runs,
I think that defense remembers that night.
Yeah, well, they should if they don't. If they don't, it's because they blocked it out of their memory.
Many hours of therapy. I just couldn't catch him. What was the camaraderie like on the team back then? What did you guys get? Because Norm was in the, he was with the coaches. He wasn't privy to a lot of the conversations that were happening in locker rooms. Did you guys kind of get along, or what was the team? What the team like back then?
Oh yeah, we did. We hung out as much as possible. I think being on the offensive side more. I think it was taken to heart that Coach Murray, he insisted that we know our audibles and we know how to run the certain plays that we're calling. And he distinctly wanted us to run it a certain way. And that was, 100% execute no matter what. So, I think if at times one of us would mess up, whether if it was running the wrong way or pitching the ball the wrong way, I think coming back to the huddle and just pepping each other up and saying, hey, you know what? It's fine. We got it on the next try. Let's get it. Let's practice again. Let's execute it right. And we did. I think our team chemistry kind of built that way, and we fed off of each other a lot.
Yeah, and and that's exactly right with the offense, and you can kind of contrast that to the way we played defense, which we had 2 defensive rules. Do you remember them, James? It doesn't surprise me if you don't, but we only had two defensive rules. That was
it
number one,
swarm to the ball?
pretty close, sprint to the ball. Number one, sprint to the ball. Number two, be pissed off when you get there.
Yes.
Those were our two defensive rules.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a question go ahead. I have a question that could go to both of you. Like, I think you would both say that Craig Murray was a great coach. What was it about Craig Murray that made him a great football coach? I mean, because he did it for 100 years, you know?
Oh gosh, man, that's a good question, Derek. You know, it's just like for me growing up, when I grew up playing for him, I think it was just he just had something about him. You know, if it was his eyes or his demeanor or his attitude, but it was like, you know, I believe in you. He believed in all of us. You know, it was like, I believe in you. You know, you're going to be, you know, you're going to be great, you know, and it's like he just had something about him that you could do wrong around him. And you wanted to be around Coach Murray.
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah. And I can tell you from the standpoint of somebody that coached with him, and this is something that, you know, as players you may not have thought of, but Coach Murray had the heart of a gambler as a coach. I mean, his play calling always had a swing for the fences kind of attitude to it. You know, I mean, he was trying to score on you every play.
Yeah.
You know, and he was not afraid of getting thrown for a big loss, you know, because I mean, that's just part of gambling, you know, and he definitely had the heart of a gambler as a play caller, you know, and I remember when he first kind of put me in charge of the defense, and this will tell you a lot about his attitude toward offense. Basically, what he told me is the job of the defense is to get the ball back to the offense as quickly as possible. And he didn't care if that meant we gave up a long touchdown as long as we were being aggressive doing it, you know? And so that's just what kind of a coach he was, you know?
He didn't. To me, he didn't seem like he got worried very much. Like, or at least he didn't give off the impression that he was worried.
Yeah, no, he was a little bit like a duck sometimes. You know what I'm saying? All calm and cool above the water and just paddling like hell below it.
I've seen him pissed off before, but like generally it's either just like stone cold silence or pissed off, throwing his clipboard or something like that. But yeah. I thought he was. To me, it was like almost. I didn't play high school football. I just didn't have. I'm a fat kid, but like I thought like. You know, to me, it was almost like Coach Murray was famous in our little world. You know, it was like he was like he might as well have been an NFL coach. And in my mind, you know, I was just like, oh, that guy knows everything about football. He's the smartest man alive when it comes to football. Go ahead, Norm.
No, I was just reading my notes over here. How about in other sports, James? Tell us about.
Let's see. I think golf and baseball were had some pretty good moments. You know, freshman year, qualified state, and I didn't know much about what I was really getting into. You know, I went out there and just, you know, competed as best as I could. Sophomore year, we didn't make it because of Jason passing away.
Right.
Barney. And baseball that particular year, we went to Lakin and sophomore year. And I remember we lost our second game. I think we had to play 2 games against them that night. And I distinctly remember, I think Ben was up to bat. Ben Murray was up to bat, and I was on first base. And we had like a steal bunt on. And so Ben got the ball down, and to make a long story short, the umpire calls it foul, I believe. And as that play was happening, I was already around second base, and the person from Lakin overthrew it to first base. I was around third and
Mm-hmm.
on my way to home to tie the game up.
Yep.
And they called a foul ball, and I had to go back all the way to first. We ended up losing that game 1-0.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
And so that was pretty hard that year for sure.
Yeah, I'll bet that was a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, at what point did you realize that being good at sports could potentially lead to, getting at least some type of, help with furthering your education? At what point did you realize that, like, the better I get at these sports, like, the better chance I have to get a scholarship?
I think growing up in a small town, I kind of felt like it was, I wouldn't say at a disadvantage, but I think it was very hard to have junior colleges, yet alone Division II schools or Division I schools come out and scout you. I mean, probably after me graduating, knowing the fact about Craig Friedendahl was probably the first athlete, that I can remember was getting scouted by college people.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just, growing up, didn't know really much about it. Didn't really think that I was going to get a scholarship to play sports. I always thought while I was in college, I'm going to have to work my way through it if I want it. So, and like what I was saying earlier tonight about, me being freshman in college for baseball, that was a totally whole new game for me, a whole new level. So,
well, and the thing about, and this is nothing against Craig's athleticism, but the reason Craig got that far is because his dad really tried to get his son, he put him in tournaments all over the country. He really brought Craig to the world, and Craig got a little bit of, he got some stuff from that. But, when you are in Elkhart, it's almost like Elkhart is, you're far. I think the Kansas is like, you're basically Oklahoma, you're basically Colorado. It's like we're just so close to the. Like, it's really hard for you to get any attention on little old Elkhart, especially when it comes to like seeing high school athletes play. So I think that a lot of that, like Craig did do well, but a lot of that is his dad and Craig. That was a calculated plan that they did. Trying to get his name out there.
I'm also going to tell you, too, though, that is kind of the nature of, baseball and basketball, both for sure, is that a lot of that recruiting and a lot of that exposure is done through the select ball and the travel teams and the things like that you do in the off season, more so than it is, say, with football or track. But definitely with those two sports, that's where a lot of that recruiting and a lot of that attention comes from. Yeah,
for sure.
So that brings up a good question, James. What advice do you have for high school athletes today?
Oh, that's a good question. Just probably give it, if you enjoy it, give it your best. Because if you don't enjoy it, you don't do it. Listen to your coaches. Bottom line, whether in good times or bad, I usually have conversations, with my oldest daughter about stuff when it comes to, school stuff, and her trying out for the dance team here at the high school next year and stuff like that. And so I just, advice would be, academically, your academics have to come first before athletics. Bottom line, you can't play, without, achieving goals and reaching goals and doing all that stuff, the classroom work first. I mean, just conversations that I have with my students here at the high school level, I talk to them about, life lessons, about, working hard, your work ethic, if you don't have a good work ethic, then, a lot of coaches may not play you for whatever. Yeah. So be a team player.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Being not like an eye on a team, but more like you're more of the care person on the team than actually the taker. Per se. So, yeah.
And what age group do you teach?
I teach high school, 9 through 12. I take that back. It's predominantly ninth graders, few sophomores and juniors.
Uh-huh.
And go ahead, Norm.
I was just going to say, when it comes to work ethic is so important, and it's hard to overemphasize that to high school kids, and I'm not one of these coaches that talks about how athletes today are lazier than they were. They're not, but there are, society is what has changed, not the athletes themselves, and that work ethic is so important. I think maybe when I first came to Liberal, right in the aftermath of Coach Cornelson, and I eventually coached for him in track and football both. But one of the things everybody there thought that what he did that was so great was develop athletes, and he did do that. But to me, the main thing that he accomplished there was to get those kids to buy into the idea of we will beat everybody because we will outwork everybody. Those kids at that time had an amazing work ethic. They'd get mad if they thought you weren't working them hard enough, and if as a coach, if you can instill that in a group of kids, you've done an amazing thing. And as an athlete, if you have that work ethic, you're going to be so much further ahead of the competition.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, you're a teacher now. Who were some of the teachers in Elkhart that you felt like really guided you into where you ended up? And then second question to that, do you find it something that's easy for you to do that with students that you teach? Like, should be, get personal with them and get to know them as people, I feel like Norm did with us, like who were some teachers that really helped you? And then is it tough for you to get to that level with your students?
Yeah, there's probably a lot more than I can think, Derek, to be quite honest. I can remember Mr. Adams, my seventh grade year in one of the, I think it was geometry class, or maybe I think it may have been high school. I can't remember. One of those, Mr. Adams, who taught math.
Would have been high school, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Coach Ashworth, he give him a big shout out, in government class. Probably another one would be Mrs. Riley for English class. I remember Miss Riley teaching. Mr. Woods, psychology for all those college classes that he taught up there in high school. I can remember Mr. McNabb, my elementary school principal. I can remember. I can't remember what I did in elementary. But
I'm a Lynn Thrall guy myself.
So I Mrs. Ford, Mrs. Wallach, when I was in kindergarten. Oh man, there's a lot. I can't quite remember all of them, but Mrs. Easy in third grade. I had her in my third grade year, and I can remember I was one of her top spellers in her class, and what we would do every week is we would have a test on Wednesday, and if we got 100 on our pre-test, then we wouldn't have to test on Friday. And there was one time because what we do on Wednesday is that we would exchange our papers, and I gave my paper. I can't remember who I gave my paper, but we would have to stand up and spell the word in the class, and the word was seizure. And I spelled it with a G instead of Z. And I tried to tell everyone, no, I meant to say it was a Z, to try to make sure I got it right. But I was the last one. I think I was the last one next to Tanya Fletcher that year, who was the last one to end up having to take the test on a Friday. So.
Yep.
To answer your second question, Derek, oh gosh. So what was it again? I can't quite remember what it was.
I guess do you because when you're a teacher, if you're a good teacher, you're doing more than teaching them about English language, all that stuff. You're getting to know them as people. You're showing them respect, and you're developing like a rapport there. Do you find it difficult to build a rapport with people that are 20 years younger than you?
I probably for the most part I don't, because it's just I sometimes when I'm building relationships with my students, I have to put I've sometimes put myself back in my high school days to see what some of these kids are going through. But even though I know times are different in these days, but I for the most part, I've been doing this now for like 12, 13, 14, 15 years, and there comes that, like what Coach Ashworth was saying last week, that pivotal moment about year 7 or 8. Is this really for me or not? But I've come to find out that number one, if you don't like what you do, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I think and being an influence on someone's life, whether or not you tell them the right thing that day, or if somebody, because a lot of kids these days, school is probably their safe place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I take that as a high commodity in my book. And so I try and engage in daily conversations, weekly conversations, not with just kids that are in my classroom every day, but kids that walk up and down these hallways every day. There's kids that I come in contact with that had me 2-3 years ago, and they always come up to me and ask me how I'm doing, because obviously I did something for them, or, said something to them that, made an impact. So I don't see it as something that's hard to do. It kind of just comes natural, being a teacher and just talking with kids and asking how their day is, or how their weekend was, or what they do over the summer, or, how their families are, just kind of daily things, just kind of keep the ball rolling. And, and there was a time, when I was in Amarillo, I had my master's got my master's in education, and so in leadership. And so at the time, I thought maybe I was going to become like an assistant principal or principal, but I never took the test because, Lord knows that I'm the world's worst test taker. So then, I didn't take the test. So I was kind of an admin assistant for one of the house principals. And so I learned a lot. Like, kids that would always constantly get in trouble, I would have to go take them out of class and, just have a sit down conversation with them, or kids that were dealing with, stuff that they're not supposed to do. Just kind of, in terms, come to Jesus meeting, and just, telling them, if you do this, this might happen to you, just try to give them the best advice. Try to give them just the best advice you can.
Yeah, we actually have that position at Liberal High School. They call it the student engagement coordinator.
Yeah.
Engagement coordinator.
Yeah, he's not really an administrator, but he does what traditionally would have been the job of a lot of administrators. He's the guy that kind of pulls kids aside and gives them a talking to, and hey, what's going on? But a lot of it is kind of a come to Jesus meeting. It really is.
It is. Yeah. It is. Especially in the days that we're living in now in society and all the social media and stuff like that, compared to what we went through.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
And you've chose a profession that, like, I made this group for Norm, Homeroom with Norm, and there's like 488 people that are potentially going to be in there. And I'm just like, you taught a lot of kids, man. He says he's done it for 30 years. But do you find yourself, like, if you see a kid you taught 3 years ago, I know that kid. Like, because to me, there has to be a large amount of wrinkles on both of your brains, especially once you hit that 30-year mark. Norm knows 500 kids. Like, I don't even remember half the kids that were in my class. Like, I don't remember all my teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if you're this way, James. I never forget faces, but I do, as the older I get, sometimes forget names, But
I'm kind of the same way. Yeah.
And even that, I don't really forget names that often, but if I'm going to forget a name, if I'm going to, I don't forget your face, but I may forget your name. But here's what I am terrible at. And that is placing kids chronologically, like until we started talking, I couldn't have told you what year James graduated. I could remember James. I can remember coaching him. I can remember the kids that were on the team at the same time he was. But if you'd asked me what year James graduated, or Ben Murray, or Jason Neese, or any of those kids, I'd have been like, I could maybe give you a 5-year range in there. Sometime in the late 90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm bad at.
Terry Murray Hout says her mother's enjoying our comments about Craig. We're hoping to get Craig on here one of these days if we can find him. Chris Hernandez says basketball your senior year against Guyman and Elkhart was an awesome game.
Yes.
See, I don't remember ever playing Guyman in football, right? That's just something we would do in basketball.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, we played them I think it was a few times in baskesketball.
Why is that different? Like you'd think that why in sports if in football do you generally know because you guys played Oklahoma teams what is that about?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a state thing. It's a numbers game.
Okay.
So Guyman is closer in size to Liberal than they are to Elkhart. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so in football, you got a field, in a small school, granted, you do it with 11 or 12 or 13 kids, but a lot of times, but you've got to field 22 positions. In basketball, you've got to field 5 positions. Yeah. So it's a little easier for a school the size of Elkhart to find 5 athletes that can compete with a school the size of Guyman than it is to find 22 athletes that can compete with a school the size of Guyman. So that's part of it. I don't know that that's all of it. A lot of it is scheduling. Guyman wouldn't have scheduled us because we wouldn't have done them any good in football. Yeah. They scheduled us in basketball because, again, the numbers game, we could be competitive with them, and yet they didn't have to drive to Oklahoma City to play us,
Right, yeah. Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, so a lot of it is a numbers game,
Well, let's see. Matt Kinney says, do you have any advice for a 40-year-old former athlete?
Don't quit your day job, Matt.
That's a toughie, Matt. You could just do what I did. Start somewhere. You don't run. Just get out and see how far you can run one day, and if you like it, keep going.
See, I've seen people do that, like Adriana Villa. One day she just went for a run, and then on Facebook for like a year and a half, 2 years, she was running 10 miles a day. I guess you get that runner's high or whatever. You get going after a while and you just feel great, I guess. But I get that runner's vomit after about a block and a half. I'm just like, oh gosh. But I mean, I'm 38 years old. All joking aside, I'm obese. I got type 2 diabetes. I guess time. I guess I've been going on a walk every day for the past week. It's not much. It's about maybe half a mile. But I'm starting there, But yeah, I did look through your Facebook, James. I did see some pictures when you were a little heavier. And it did inspire me to get off the couch a little bit, for sure.
Good. Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, it's just been a long journey. It's just been ongoing. So, yeah.
Here's a question for you, James.
Okay.
If you could go back to high school again, would you do anything differently? If so, what?
Oh, gosh. If I could do anything but differently, man, that's a good question.
Besides spend a little more time on the 400.
To be honest, I'm just gonna say, probably not. I felt like, I did a lot, not just in athletics, but in school and being in a small town, you can only do so much that you could do. Now, if the things that I've kind of done, like obstacle course running, if that stuff, or like the stuff that I'm teaching was in high school, definitely.
Yeah.
If there was obstacle course running or races back in, the early, late 90s, and stuff that I'm teaching now that I've been teaching the last 3, 4, 5 years, I would definitely have taken those classes in high school for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
So,
and do your kids? You said you have a daughter that's 13. You said. So is she getting into athletics at all, or? She
is in dance.
Okay.
So she has a big tryout this coming Friday. And we did her schedule not too long ago for high school, and she she of all the teachers for one of the electives that she had to have, she requested to be in my class for next year.
Oh, okay. So she's going to school there at Robinson, huh? That's good.
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to that? Because to me, I asked Diane Fenn. I was like, "You taught your kids," and I don't remember anybody ever being like, "Oh, well, she lets JW get." I'm pretty sure she was harder on all three of her kids than she ever was anybody. But you do run that risk of people saying like, "Oh, yeah, well, if teacher's daughter," like, what are your thoughts on that? Because there's other teachers, her being in your class.
I'm at a very, I would say, not the term conservative, but a really laid back district. This place where I'm at is great. The administration's great. The camaraderie here is great. And so, from her counselor telling her, the counselor has her husband teaching here as well. And so he's had 2 kids go through him. So it's not that it does kind of like get that image that it looks bad, but I'm kind of looking forward to it. I don't, and I think she is too, but she'll disagree with me. She's rather shy. And so, I think she'll be excited for it, just to, get to do the stuff that, I teach in here. So I don't perceive it as, being the father daughter in the same class, that she's going to get, advantages.
Do you have any
and all that
sons?
kind of stuff. So what's that? Sons? Yes.
Do you have
I
any
a 2-year-old
sons?
son.
Okay, well, come back on the show whenever you teach them. That'll be a fun story. Have some good stories for us.
Yeah. So
the boys are ornery, man. Well, this has been great, man.
They are ornery. He just turned 2 back in February. So,
2.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you spread them out pretty good then, didn't you? Wow.
I did. 13, 8, she'll be 8 tomorrow, and then 2. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's kind of get one into school before you started on the next one that way. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you enjoyed the family man thing? Being the dad and all, doing everything you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's challenging being a parent. I'll tell you that. Especially when we were in Amarillo, we had my wife's family was there for the most part. And then being away from Elkhart 2.5 hours or so, and being here in Waco, we find it a lot more challenging, but yet we are very dependable on one another, and I couldn't be any more happier than that. So we depend on each other a lot, communicate a lot better. We have to, when I'm refereeing basketball on Tuesdays or, Mondays or Friday nights and stuff like that, we always have to plan out well in advance, who's picking up who, what time and all this and that kind of stuff. So it has its ups and downs for sure, but it's a great adventure. The adventure's continuing, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Go ahead, Norm. I just have a question about the. Go ahead. I have a question after you, though.
I was just going to ask James, tell us about officiating basketball a little bit.
Oh,
that's kind of a tough gig.
I'll tell you what. I'll be honest. Being now here in Waco, I started officiating when I was in Amarillo. I got on it for a couple of years, and then that's when I went into teaching and coaching, and then I got off of it. And then when I was done coaching and teaching, I went right back on it. So I really don't know how I said, hey, James, why don't you just start refereeing basketball? I mean, something had to click, or somebody told me, why don't you try this or that? And so I got into it. I've been doing it now for 16 years. And so I'm not at the collegiate level yet, but I've had a lot of guys tell me, hey, have you gone to camps before? I've only gone to maybe one little camp that really I wouldn't call it a camp. It was just kind of a, hey, if you come to this camp, you're still going to be calling varsity basketball type thing. So anyway, been calling for 16 years. There's a whole lot more, I would say, potential in the Waco surrounding area down here, because back up in Amarillo, like if you went like college, NAIA or JUCO or Division III or anything like that, you had to travel 3 hours just for one game.
Right.
Here in Central Texas, the closest school is here in Waco, or 20 minutes up. 20 minutes or so.
Well, my buddy coaches. He refs in Amarillo, and he loves it. He's been doing it for about 10 years, but he got to the point where he almost quit because he said he's doing mostly the high school level. He said the parents are sometimes just ridiculous. Do you have any of that going on?
Definitely.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Especially down here in Central Texas. I had a few playoff games toward the end of this season. Schools from like the Beaumont area. Just
don't call them out, man. They know where you are, man. Don't call them out.
They will. I mean, it's right there on the court. There's so many comments and just you just got to have thick skin.
Yeah, you do. That to me is why being a basketball official is so tough. Is two things. Number one, there's a lot more judgment calls in basketball, than there are in some other sports. Some of the rules are not quite as clear cut. And number two, the fans are right on top of you, as compared to football or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, people have asked me to do football. They've asked me to do baseball, but I like basketball. There's just something really about it with the atmosphere, the heat of the moment, the competitiveness, and like you said, it's judgment calls. Judgment
there's a lot of judgment calls in basketball. There really are. I mean, charge or a foul, that is a judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, charge or a block, that is a judgment call. And a lot of them in basketball are.
Yeah. Is basketball at the high school level, is it? Because, I mean, I don't know much about sports, but I know that when I watch basketball on, the professionals, they don't call traveling at all. They'll take, 9 steps and do a layup. And also you see a lot of these flops and stuff. Do you see a lot of that kind of stuff on a high school level? Do you call traveling? Because I watch the NBA and I count way more than 2 steps. Maybe I'm wrong. But.
I mean, there is to a degree. I believe that they have what is called an NBA officiating school, and so a lot of guys have to go through that schooling to become an NBA official and stuff like that, because it's totally different than women's college, men's college, and for sure high school. But there are. I think for me, it's going to be very challenging to decipher from high school on one night and college on another night, because the mechanics, the rules, and all that, they are, for the most part, they're quite a bit. Some of them are the same, but they're not.
Yeah.
So you gotta have that. I guess you could say the term memorization. Okay, it's college night, you got to do this and this and this. High school night, you got to do this and this and that. So it just depends. It is challenging, and I like it. I enjoy it.
Yep.
So
that's great. I used to like you until I found out you were an official.
That was a pretty bogus call, Jenkins.
That's right.
Hey, Derek, I've heard a lot of that this year. Geez, Jenkins, that was a bogus call.
Who's he going for?
Yeah.
Well, my buddy, he said that he almost quit because he was just he's like, I love reffing. I've been doing it for 10 years. He's like, but these parents are just the worst. He's like, they say stuff that, and you're like, you realize there's kids here, right? That's your kid. You're saying that horrible stuff, at a game, but I mean, people are competitive,
Yeah, they are. I used to do this, but I don't do it anymore. But I had to always carry a whistle in my pocket, and I just pull it out and say, hey, you help? So But I don't do that anymore. That was probably back in my days in Amarillo.
I remember Ryan Hard. He would yell from the stands, but it was mostly at his own kids. Like I don't think he was yelling at the coaches. But Ryan Hard's dad, and he was out. He would yell. You know, you definitely have that going on, and you know, a lot of times in colleges, you're getting yelled at by like 4 other students and stuff. But in the high school level, like that's like, mom, dad, Uncle Jack, everybody's yelling at Norm. Yeah. Like, hey,
and Derek, to add to that, it's embarrassing to the kid. That kid's out there playing, and it is flat out. They feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but I mean, it'll happen. That's why I wanted to ask. That was my final question. Like, how do you get along with the parents over there coaching those, reffing those games? That's got to be.
I mean, fun. I don't. For the most, I tune them out. You know, I hear them chirp like, "Oh, I know who they're rooting for tonight." I'm like,
"Yeah,
I'm not rooting for anybody, but okay."
I'm rooting for that clock to hit 0 so I can go home.
Yes. Collect that paycheck.
Yeah. Yep. There you go.
So,
well, James, hey, we've had enough of your time, buddy. We're going to let you get home to your family, get a little sleep, get ready for school tomorrow. But we appreciate you being with us tonight. We enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's really fun, man.
I've been looking forward to it. I think the first time I recall watching one of y'all's shows was Derek. I think you had Michaela Morsi.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
That was
awesome.
That was the first. That's the first one I think when I started watching it. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad to have you on, and obviously, I know your sisters really well. I know your dad really well. I know Betty Joe. Tell everybody I said hi.
Yes,
I know your family because your mom hangs out with Roxanne, my Aunt Roxanne. So I'm telling you, like anytime I ever go to Elkhart, like I hang out with your dad, Betty Joe, your sister. So, so I feel like I know you pretty well, man, through your family. So.
Yeah,
well, there you go.
Exactly.
Yep. Well,
guys,
James,
I thoroughly enjoyed it as well. I appreciate you having me on, man.
Absolutely, James. We enjoyed it. You know, maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, guys. Hey, in the Free Zone with Norm is a production of Back Home Media. Go to Back Home Media's webpage. Check it out there. Check us out on the podcast platforms. You'll find those right there to the left of James's head under In the Free Zone with Norm. Download us at any of those podcast platforms. And until next week, thank you a lot for listening, and we'll see you next Wednesday, guys. Thanks a lot.
See you guys.
Well, I don't think and I thought it, that's different. I said what I said and I meant it, or lamented. Words given weight without thought in a person, the way that I talk and the way that I ought to be able to pause and to say that the fault can be placed on my arms, to display full assault, to disgrace in its arm. Pray for the day they could wait for the calm. You can't control the storm, only weather it, whether it's 5 weeks and 5 days of rain sideways, or scorched earth, search for depth or water left with all the thorns, with the petals gone, settle on the breath of autumn. If the ground fits, wear it, the crown